Well, welcome to Rekindle XM, David. We are so excited to have you here with us today, and we are so excited for you and your journey as a brand new author. So you have written a book, there's Masha holding it up, called Almost Home, Setting Our Sights Towards Heaven. And we're so excited to have a conversation today about your book and your life, which is sort of the story behind the book. So, David, you and I met in a podcast class, and your story struck me because of the way you framed your life, your faith, your family, and your career journey. In many ways, you followed a career track like most of us in the professional world, but you made some decisions to choose your own dream and the life that you felt God led you toward. As fellow Christians, we at Rekindle share that idea of having a life of purpose and following that path that God leads us to. Our listeners are primarily those who have gone through professional and personal burnout. However, it's really hard to go against those cultural norms which are often contributing to our burnout. For those who have faith in God, I just think we can learn a lot from your story. And even for those who perhaps don't have a particular religious belief, we hope your story is going to inspire them to think differently about their lives and how they define their own American dream. So you've written this book called Almost Home, and as we're recording this, it's actually coming out in literally days. By the time we post this, I'm sure it will have been out. But first of all, congratulations. That is a huge milestone. So we want to, celebrate with you
Yeah,
getting
thanks a
that
lot.
first book out. And I've read the author's copy of that book. I loved it. It made me think and laugh, and a couple times, kind of cry a little. But I definitely had a lot to relate to. So first of all, congratulations! And how are you doing with all the excitement of this first book, hopefully first of many coming out?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. I tell you, we are getting up close to the launch, and it's been pretty exciting the last few weeks, just trying to put all the parts and pieces together for a big launch party and for the actual public launch of the book, which essentially means it's available for purchase to the public. I've had author copies like the one you spoke of that I've had for months now, and so I'm excited to get it out to a lot more folks in a lot more venues. So that's really good, and we're happy to get to this point.
So, so David, this book was really the story of your life up to about this point. Obviously, it stops right about the point you're starting to write. And I think, one of the interesting concepts is that you start the book with this concept of home. And of course, that's the title of your book is Almost Home. You talk about how as children we have this ideas of what our home is going to be like. What was that dream for you, even starting as a young kid? What did you think of when you thought of your future life as an adult and the home and the life and the career? What did that look like for you?
It was really just painted for me like probably most folks in the Western world, especially in the United States, where you want to grow up, have a responsible life, get a job, have a family, and live in a home and be safe and happy and secure, and have all the things that we envision, growing up. But there was just something innately inside me that, even as a kid, and I talk about it in the book, I'd go off places and, kids go off and have a fort and a playhouse and this place they call their own, and it's really not much different than what we do when we're grown. We want to create a place that's safe where we can, lay our head down at night and have a warm bed and food to eat and all the things that we anticipate makes us secure. And I think that's really a good portion of what the book is about is just that idea of home. And so we get that picture of, the perfect family, the perfect home, and then, as we strive toward that and work toward what we envision with that picture in our mind from, the culture around us, the media around us, everything that we take in, our whole lives, we try to build up to that expectation, with our life as we put all the parts and pieces together. And then when all that doesn't work out perfectly, then we get stressed out and challenges come and then work comes into that, and I think that's where we really just get stressed and introduced to our life and our family, and just trying to figure it all out, and it's not working quite right.
It's true. We have this concept of the American dream, but you're right. It usually doesn't work out exactly as we plan. What when you were starting out with having kids and the job and all of this, how did your career play into your dreams for the home that you hope to create?
I would really say that was front and center for me. My mom and dad were both successful. Dad uh, was a retired Navy guy, and everything about what they were doing, taught us to get an education and get a good job, and then follow up, and if you did all those things, the parts and pieces would all fall together. So that was kind of like the foundational piece, was to create your job, and it really, ideally, as I look back, I think it wasn't necessarily a pursuit of your passion and the things that you were necessarily created to be, but I think it really, as I look back, I think, oh, wow, there's all these different career paths that I can go down that are going to be, satisfying or very satisfying. But at the end of the day, you also looked at, is this going to pay the bills? Because, that's also a huge aspect of being able to provide for yourself. And so, that also can lend itself to either good or bad consequences when you choose a career path. So yeah, I would say the foundational piece, is just making sure that I got a good career going and a good job going, and then started putting all the other parts and pieces in to go with that.
And David, it seems like you had a pretty secure career for most of that. Um, what was it that kind of led you in the direction? Because you kind of went into manufacturing engineering, more of a little bit technical of a side, and then you switched over. So tell us a little bit about where you started, and then that switch sort of partway through your career where you jumped, like a lot of people will do during their career.
Yeah, which I wouldn't say that's terribly abnormal, but it was for me. I started out my career as a computer-aided drafter, as a designer, and actually finished up my college work as a electronics technician. And while I was doing that, learned some computer-aided drafting along the way, and that was about the time that CAD really took off and was uh, really growing a lot. And I enjoyed doing that. Just the idea of being able to get on a computer and draw pictures all day and get paid for it was exciting to me. So that's where I took down that, or went down that path with my career as a designer. And then, over the course of a dozen or so years, as you get in, entrenched in a job and doing the same thing a lot, boredom sets in a little bit, and certainly you get to a place where you might not actually be doing the same things you were doing when it all started. And so, it was kind of like a place where I was just asking myself, is this really what I want to do anymore? And at the same time, as our family environment was growing, and we were growing exponentially in the size of our family, and a lot of adventures were taking place, I started using writing as an opportunity to kind of vent and exercise my creative abilities, in that area that I really didn't know that I thought I could do well. And so while I was doing that, and as our family was growing, I started looking over the fence, for another opportunity outside of the engineering world I was in. And and that really opened up for me. It was strange. It was putting me outside of my comfort zone for sure, as a person that was just used to, living in that engineering environment, going to work and sitting in my cubicle every day and pretty much doing the same thing a lot. And then I went out and got a job in marketing in the same company, but that was a huge stretch for me, knowing that my world was opening up as big as can be versus what I was used to. And so that was tough and challenging all at the same time. But it really opened up new opportunities for me to pursue my writing and pursue a career in public speaking, where I got up and stood in front of people and talked and shared, products. So it really, after spending 16 years in design engineering and then jumping off into a marketing career, it really just took me down a new path, which was really positive for me for a good long time.
And you mentioned your family, and I think Masha has a question as well, but we want to come back to that. So, Masha, did you have a question?
I did. One thing that I really appreciated reading your book, David, was how you entrusted the journey to God. And I see your dependence on his guidance and trust in his plan. And I think as a society, as a culture, we've more gotten away from having faith in the plan that God has for us. And we try to take that control and planning and have the desired outcomes. Like we take God usually out of those equations versus putting them in. And reading your book was a really great reminder of that, that no, I got to walk according to the greater plan. Tell me a little bit about that walk of faith and how you've entrusted God with your family numbers, which was really inspiring. You don't see that very much anymore, but I praise you for that. That is something beautiful that we should all cherish. It is a promise to us. And also in the career, when you face those really challenging situations, when you knew you had to move, but you weren't quite sure, the path wasn't revealed to you yet. Like what is the main driver for you to walk in your faith and inspire the hearts that are listening to you right now?
So there were different challenges along the journey, and we're even in the middle of one right now with my writing career. But in those early years, we knew that we had to be in the Word, we had to be close to God, and have a consistent quiet time and be speaking to the Lord in prayer on a daily basis. And my wife and I commune like that regularly. We pray together daily, and even outside of that, you have to build a community of believers around you, of like-minded family and friends that are for you and for what the Lord wants. Because sometimes we get chasing down a path where we have these desires, in our hearts, and sometimes it takes your spouse or a coworker or somebody you go to church with, or the Holy Spirit, to just get you on a corrected course. But on the flip side of that, you really want all of those folks and circumstances and different things in your life to really align well, so that you can have that peace as you move forward. And that's really the way we work and move to make decisions. And sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes you don't get what you want. And that's the challenging part of trusting in the Lord, is Lord, please take me down this path. And then he says, nope, I got a different one for you, or a better one. Or sometimes even right now, as we look to our future and work to develop this writing career for me, I don't have it all figured out yet, and it's really a challenge to be walking in those steps. But I can look back and I can see, even now that I've written a book, it's like sometimes I have to go back and reread my own words to confirm for myself. I talk about waiting, in the book, and I talk about leaning on others, and I talk about all these different things, that you're supposed to do. And so it's like sometimes you got to go back and eat your own words to get some clear direction. But I think the one of the interesting things is My wife and I were both reading in Hebrews 11 the other day, and God brought us both to that place separately. But it's really a place where I love to hang out for a while and meditate on it because that's typically what everybody refers to as the faith chapter. And in that faith chapter, the writer tells us over and over and over, by faith Abraham, by faith Moses, and by faith all these different heroes of the Old Testament. By faith, all these people trusted God and believed that there was something better on the other side, even if they couldn't see it. And so that's where we're walking right now, even is just trusting in the Lord and leaning on Him and taking the steps He wants us to take today and trusting Him for the next steps tomorrow.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah. And, David, I love the part of the book, and I don't want to give it all away, but I actually love the part of the book when you and your wife Katrina got married. You each had two, so you were already, had four kids when you came together and got married. And then you talk about praying and asking for God's guidance as to whether or not you should start, having more children and adding to your family. And you talk about that, how you took the time to think about that, pray about that, and wait for God's answer. When I read that in the book, it was interesting because that was sort of a point at which you were choosing to go against the culture, if you will, because our culture seems to have these very defined ideas of what a family should be. Would you have said that at the time as you guys were praying about this, thinking about it, and then decided, yep, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just let God bless us how He chooses? Did you ever have a thought about, oh, we're going to go against sort of the American cultural ideal here? And you talk about the fact that this wasn't always easy for you and your wife and your kids.
I think about that from the perspective, at first, we were just praying, Lord, do you want us to have more children at all? And, because like you said, we had two apiece from a previous marriage. And so we went into this right after our honeymoon, coming back home to our four kids. And so, even at that point, we're way beyond the cultural norm of a typical family size. And so, but we really felt like in the early part of that, we were just, seeking the Lord to know whether or not we should bring more lives into our family, you know, kind of in a maybe a selfish way, just wanting to bring that unity, of my wife and I to be able to have our own children. But then after time progressed, and we had our first son together, and then we had a daughter together, and it was kind of over a course of several years that we really leaned into the Lord and just totally gave all that to Him. And so, yeah, it was really, in the midst of all that and going through that over the course of several years, uh, we were really just challenged, from a lot of different directions of going against the cultural norm. We even had doctors, that was during the process. We had essentially not really much trouble with our first and second that we had together. But when our third child together arrived, we had some trouble in the hospital, and we literally had the doctor, the pediatrician that came in and that was treating our daughter that had to have an extended hospital stay. And she literally told us, if I were you, I would never have any more children because of this challenge and this thing in front of us. Well, we had already committed, to the Lord that we were going to trust Him. And so that was a huge, challenge. I don't even write about this in the book, but I may in another one later. But, just to have people just put it right in your face, or, one of the big challenges was just going to the store or going anywhere, and everybody would just look at you and say, "Are all those yours?" And or just, having feeling like they have the permission to ask you, well, don't you know what causes that? And, those sort of questions. So
Yeah.
it's really tough, when you're just dealing with all this and you feel like you're definitely moving in a direction the Lord told you to go, but then all you get is resistance from most directions.
Mm.
And, I think that's so true when we go against what most people consider the norm in our culture. And, it's something here at Rekindle that we want people to really think about, whether it's with their family, their lifestyle, the way they live out their faith, their careers. You will definitely encounter resistance anytime you choose to do something different. But looking back, now that you look back, just at your family, and you're gonna make some other choices here that as we go along in the book that are also against sort of the norm, if you will. But now that you look back, um, it's a silly question to ask you if it was worth it because I already know what the answer is going to be, but just tell us a little bit about that, like how you've seen God bless you as you made that decision and kind of just, walked the life of faith and with the family that He gave you.
So it's been tough, and it's not been easy, and it's not been the a place where we can just have it all figured out. But I look back and I am so blessed. I'm so blessed to have our 9 children that God has given us. They are gifts, just like the word says, they are gifts from Him, and they bless us, and we are going to see fruit from that we have yet to see, and we're already seeing a lot of it. But someday there's going to be so much fruit from all of this faith walk that we can't even contain it all. But then when you take that to the next level, uh, with my corporate life, and like you said, Michelle, making decisions that go against the grain. Everybody really wants you to comply. For the most part, they want you to be in that 95th percentile of people that just line up and do what you're told. And when you're not in that group, they don't like it. So that's a real challenge, and so you're not going to get tons of support in every direction. So
Oh, it speaks to me on a level you can't imagine.
yeah.
Yeah, Masha definitely has a story about that, as do Brian and I. It's interesting because when we read your stories, the timelines of your story go along with ours, and they're drastically different. But yet, it was just interesting because Brian and I have also chosen to go against the norm, and Masha is working towards that right now. Um, but like you said, it's rewarding, and you've mentioned that there's eternal rewards that you're going to reap literally forever. But it doesn't negate the struggle at the time. Um, so let's go ahead and move on in your story. So you've got the what most people would kind of consider the American dream. You've got a good corporate job. You've got a wonderful family. You built this amazing house, which that's a whole story by itself. But I loved it because my parents have built 2 houses, and so I know the struggles that come along with that. So you've got this big corporate job, this big family, you're building a house. You get into the house of your dreams. Like a lot of people would have looked at you and said, wow, this is all, this all looks like what most people would want. Um, but then after building the house of your dreams, you decided that wasn't it. And I love what your daughter said. So do you want to tell us what your daughter said, that conversation about, the dream home,
Yeah, so the
where you
there's
guys
so
are,
many different
yeah.
there's so many different parts and pieces about the dream home. It was part of, everything we alluded to earlier about, what do you envision? And I talk about some of that in the book about, the type of home we wanted and all the things that we thought would be great. And we really had a physical need, which I think is also part of the challenge of the cultural norm. Everybody thinks that for every child you must have a bedroom, or you got to have, certain levels of space just to house so many people. When in, other countries, or even in our country, you know, 60 or 70 years ago, I can remember the conversation I just had with my dad the other day when they were talking about hard times, and when they grew up, and my dad was one of nine, and he talked about how they would have a bedroom with a full-size bed in it, and they would put five kids on the bed laying crossways, and it never occurred to them that there was anything better or different. That's just what they did and had to deal with. So, the cultural norm of space is a challenge, but we had a unique uh, point in our life, especially with the challenges of a step family and kids coming in and out of our home and trying to create spaces. And we were moving into the teenage years with our four older children, while at the same time bringing kids in that were nursing and in diapers and toddlers. And, there wasn't always so much great love from the teenagers of appreciating all the crying and everything that came with all that. So, but we really did need some space, and so God led us to build this house. This it's so funny. I had a coworker that was walking this journey with us, and he really encouraged me to write down a lot of the stories and stuff. But he gave me the hardest time one day when we were in the middle of building the house. I think we just got it built, and it was back in the day, in the early years of my corporate life, when I could have my wife and the kids come walk in there at work and visit us and talk. And one of my coworkers asked one of our sons, "Well, what do you think about your new house?" And to hear my son say this, I mean, just didn't even miss a beat. He's like, "Well, I think we have the biggest house in the neighborhood now." And so that was just a little bit of a humbling experience. But we did build quite a large house that we felt like we needed, and it was something that God really helped us walk through and build and take us through that in a miraculous way. But at the end of all that, we got to that point, lived in the house. It was the house we loved. It was our dream house, and we we were at a point where we were trying to think about downsizing, think about, wow, how much stuff have we heaped up here? And we we literally started praying, Lord, is this where you want us to be? Which sounded completely crazy. And so as we moved forward and prayed through that, uh, we were just seeking the Lord, and I really felt like God had uh, given me an answer about that. And I actually spoke those words to my wife, as we prayed about it and as we thought through it. Uh,
Um, so David, when you were building that house, and there's other parts in this story that you seem to voluntarily walk into the most stressful situations you could ever build for yourself or set up for yourself. How did you deal with that stress? Because those were definitely situations where you could have easily walked into burnout.
Yeah, and just you mentioned you were the general contractor, and that by
Yeah.
itself is so
yeah,
stressful.
yeah. So when we went into that house project, we really went into it with the idea that we needed more space, a bigger house, right? And we looked for houses, and nothing really fit our criteria that would actually do for us. So we went into that thinking, okay, I'm a drafter, right? I can draw house plans, although I'm a mechanical drafter, which is a totally different bird. But as we went into that, we had some ideas on what we wanted, and went to some contractors and found out really fast that we couldn't afford to pay somebody to build us this house. And so backing into that, yeah, I became the general contractor, and my dad had done it. My wife's dad did it, so why couldn't we? And here I was working a full-time job, and let's see, we had seven children at that time. One, my wife was nursing, another one in diapers, and another one a toddler. So, and working full time. So, yeah, Brian, to answer your question, it was just getting on my face before the Lord and trying to continue with unity in our family while I'm working a full-time job and building a house every day. So that was tough, but I can't say it was stress-free at all. There was a time when we started that building process that I really put together a lot of pictures. It's like, okay, and we hired a lot of the, main things to be done for us, like the foundation and the framing and, those sort of things. But there was a time when I'd go out and take pictures, and this was before everybody had digital cameras. So it was a you know, commodity to have a camera with film in it and go out there and take pictures all the time. So I did that daily. As the process is moving along, I want to schedule this and I want to see it happening. And I took it at certain views, thinking, oh, this is going to be cool. I can document this really well later. Well, about a month into that process of me being the photographer, the pictures ceased because that's when the work kicked in, and me and my dad and my father-in-law and everybody else imaginable that we could get to show up was out there working. And so yeah, it was stressful. And also in the midst of all that, while we've got everybody asking us all these questions like, why are you growing this family size, and what in the world's wrong with you people? I have to walk out there one day on the job site and break the news to my dad that we're expecting our eighth child in the middle of that building process. So it kind of seemed to expedite the process and think, man, we got to get this place done. So yeah, it was hard, it was stressful, but we really knew that God was walking us through the middle of that process, even though it was a hard time. But I think that lends itself to the idea of something that we really try to live in knowing that it was a season. This is not something I'm going to live with continually and endlessly. This is just a season we're going through, and there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But I think to answer your question, Brian, with the burnout part of it, I didn't even think about burnout at that point. I was just like, okay, I've got to work because we got to eat, we got to pay, we're building a house that I got to make the payment on. So burnout just really hadn't even set in, I think, at that point in my life with everything that was going on with us. It was just like, this is what we got to roll up our sleeves and do. The Lord's going to help us with it. The Lord has told us to do it, and so we're going to do it and stick with it.
Wow.
So, David, you built this house, you put all of this time, energy, money, sweat into it, and then there comes a point at which you feel like God is leading you to sell it and to move to something else. So I'm curious about, did you feel like you were moving closer to a dream that you and Katrina had, and that God was leading you for specific purposes? Or what was it that started that thought of, oh, we think it's time to sell what many would consider your dream home?
Yeah, so that, I think it was multifaceted. It was like, okay, Lord, we built this dream house. It's where you told us to build the dream house. We have it, and we have our large family, and we live, in an ideal location. And then the Lord starts working on me in the midst of all that. But the Lord wasn't working in my wife Katrina yet. She was still kind of resistant, and we hadn't arrived at that unity point yet. And so it was kind of like, her saying, well, you better go back and ask God again because I don't think you got the right answer, sort of thing. And that was kind of the resistance we felt all along the way, even after we told our parents, well, God told us to sell this place and move on. And they were like, what? That's the stupidest thing you could have ever said. But to answer your question, Michelle, about uh, where was God taking us at this point, I think one of the biggest things that had been front and center for us for a while was to get debt free, to get out of debt, and this home was seemed to be a big obstacle to that. I had me and my engineering mind, I'd created a plan, and if we could work this much extra or get, extra jobs or what have you, we could pay off this place and stay here. And so, just that's kind of the exercise I went through often of, okay, here's my plan. I'll put it in a spreadsheet and we'll have this place paid off in so many years. But we just felt an urgency to, number one, expedite that process of getting out of debt faster. And number two, lean in to the Lord and what he had next for us. And I think it was that second thing that was really, front and center for us, was really just seeking out, Lord, where do you want us to be? If this is not it, where do we need to go?
And were there thoughts at this point that your corporate career wasn't what you ultimately wanted? Because, I don't know if that was happening at this point, but it definitely prepared you because you were getting out of debt, you were finding this different lifestyle, and were you thinking, eventually I want to do something other than what I've been doing, which is, working at a desk for the last, however many 20, 25 years? Was that part of the thought that you could see that particular part of your work life coming to an end, or was that still completely unknown when you guys started thinking about moving?
I think it was kind of a mix. We were just like, okay, I mean, everything in our culture says, wow, you've got a job at this corporate place. It's going to be where you're going to be at for the rest of your life. And to go in another direction is ludicrous, crazy. You've got a 401k and you just got to keep working on that, all those things. But so, yeah, it was just over a course of time, and then God putting the desires in us for this farm that we now live on. Just all those things was a culmination that was kind of all happening together. I was, you know, asking the question, do I need to work for this place? We were asking, well, what does farm life look like, and what is that path for us? And, all of that combined with, what I just said, Lord, where would you have us to be serving you in obedience to make sure that we are thriving for you in the place, where you desire us to be at this point in our life, you know. But I think God really does things in us as we develop new skill sets, as we develop new desires and experiences in life. And so, yeah, some people probably can just settle into being, whatever that career or whatever that time may be for them or that place. I'm sure we can probably all think of somebody, it's like, oh yeah, that guy worked at such and such a place for 40 years, and that defined that person, and they lived happy, and they have everything they ever wanted. But I think more often than not, I think the world is starting to realize, that wow, we change and seasons change, and as our family dynamic changes, we're going to be at a point, in a few years from now where we might not even have any kids at home. And so, just the idea of being aware that we don't have to just settle for just staying in this place, but there's nothing wrong with staying in that place either. So we have to find what that mix is for us, where God wants us to be, and ideally, making ourselves available to be obedient when He says to go. I think that is so key, to just be able to lean in and listen and say, okay, Lord, whatever it is you have for me, I'm going. Just say the word.
And it's interesting because I think we don't always see it at the time, but when I read through your story, it's sort of clear to see how God was preparing you. And there were seasons of waiting, there were seasons of change, but all throughout that, like he was giving you what you needed for the next step. And that's probably true for a lot of us, but we don't always realize it at the time. We'll see it as we look back. But when you're thinking about these steps that you make in life and the seasons and the changes that are coming, especially for those of us who have faith, I think we can have that confidence that he is preparing us step by step. And even though some steps might seem crazy, like you said, Katrina, when you first said it was time to sell this house, she probably thought that seemed crazy. But as your story progresses, you can see, no, that was part of this path that God wanted you to walk, and he moved you there for a reason, and he knew what was coming. So, yeah, and I loved seeing that through the book. And I think for readers, especially who have that that deep spiritual faith, that they will relate with that as well, that you can see how God is working through these circumstances in your life to bring you to the next step. So yeah, that was encouraging, and I enjoyed the way that you laid that out in the book.
And David, my favorite question that I have to ask, knowing what you know now and the journey that you have endured with your beautiful family, what is the one thing that you would do differently?
Wow, that's a tough one, Masha. Probably learning how to wait more, instead of being impatient, honestly. Even though I hate it, I hate the waiting. But I think that we have, at different times in the process, uh, maybe moved a little bit too abruptly in, different areas or whatever. I can't really think of a specific thing right off the top of my head, but I think that when we let impatience and strong desires overtake us and take us down a path that requires a course of correction from the Lord, uh, that's where we get messed up. And so, waiting for the right path is ideal, but sometimes when we go down that wrong path, that's where we learn and grow, and that correction does come for those of us who follow the Lord. And so we just have to welcome that correction and be happy to have it, because He is a loving Father that wants to get
I
us
can
going in
think
the
of
right direction.
I can think of a few times that has happened to me
Yeah.
as you were
Oh, yeah.
answering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And towards the end of your book, you talk about praying for clarity. And what does that look like for you? Like here you are, you're uncertain, you have to move, you have to get going and doing some things. There's some actions that are necessary, but there's still some uncertainty. So when you prayed for clarity, what kind of clarity did you get? So just to resonate with our audience that, there is clarity that comes our way. What does it look like for you?
I have a new term that I have a friend that I've met this year, a fellow author, that says it a lot, and Katrina and I have been kind of saying it to each other. But he says, when you know it in your knower, that's when you know how to move forward. And which sounds, but to really answer your question, Masha, it's getting to that place where things align, where you know in your heart, in your spirit, yes, that was the Lord speaking to me in this circumstance, from that person, from this Bible verse, or in my prayer time. And you see that consistently. And you see, things coming at you consistently. But we go down to the creek and walk, and there's times when the water is just amazing and clear and crystal clear. And as I was praying for clarity, I looked down in the water where I was sitting. It was actually by the tree that's on the cover of my book. So I'm sitting at this place, and Katrina is over a little ways from me in a different place, not far away. And I'm looking down into this crystal clear water, and there's this beautiful fish that just swims up right underneath me. And I'm praying, Lord, I need to know if I'm supposed to leave this job with crystal clarity, as clear as I can see through this water and see all the colors on that fish. And as I prayed that, Katrina heard me pray that, and she's like, I don't see the fish. because she was kind of at a different angle. So that was kind of a little bit of an object lesson too, that we all have to be at the same place, to be able to see with clarity. But that was my prayer. But then over the course of some time, uh, there were a series of events that happened that really spoke to me about that word clarity. I got a piece of mail from one person that was just totally random, and the whole subject of it was about clarity. And then I get an email from another person that's the whole subject of it is about clarity. So it was like, okay, we know we need to move forward, but we don't know exactly how, but we need clarity, Lord. And God just woke me up that morning and He said, there's more to life than this. And, uh, and I wrote it down immediately. And it was what I was doing in my job. And it was just like crystal clear. And it kind of set us on a course of, okay, now we know we're leaving. Now we know I'm getting out of this job. It's not if, but when. And so it really kind of set us on a really straight course to know we're in this place. And by the way, we had put some things in order, gotten some financial things in order, paid off all of our debts. We're completely debt free at that point, and we're just drastically saving money to prepare for the next step.
Wow.
And David, that's interesting. So you talk about you knew it was coming to an end and you were doing some preparation. And when I think about people who are tired of the corporate world, many of them are going to be burned out. Masha, Brian, and I all had that experience where, we were burned out in our corporate lives and we had to take various steps to recover. For Brian and I, ultimately, it was the same decision that you made, which is we know that we are leaving our corporate lives. But you're right, there's this question of when, and there's this period of preparation. And sometimes that period of preparation is much longer than you want. And you talked about waiting. If we have folks in our audience who they do feel like they are being called to step out of corporate life and step into a different life, and they're waiting and preparing, what advice would you give to them? Because that can be, for us, it was almost 2 years from the time we decided we need to leave until we were able to. And I don't quite know the timing on yours, but I know there was a period of time. So what advice would you give to people who are in that time of waiting and preparation right now?
I would say, be bold and know that life does exist outside of your current position. It really can. We get so entrenched thinking that the place we're at is the place that we're always going to be, and life doesn't exist, whether it's outside of this company, outside of my town, outside of, whatever confines we put around our existence. We think that the world is so small and tightly defined by what we are and where we're at. But be willing to uh, think outside the box and think, wow, I can do something somewhere else. I can do something different. I can get new skill sets, or I can take the skill sets I have and go do it for, even if they want to work for a company. People get so entrenched with thinking, I'm just stuck here. I can't change. If I change, it's going to be risky. And they can't get out of maybe a toxic environment to go do the same work for somebody else in a better environment. So, we just set up all these traps that, there's never going to be somewhere else where I can survive. And so, be willing to step out and know that you can survive elsewhere.
So one final question for you then is, what do you see ahead? What's in your future, or what are you praying about and considering?
So obviously, my calling right now is writing, and I've got this first book. I've got 4 or 5 more that I'd like to write and finish, which is going to be, over the course of several years ahead for us. And so part of the challenge with that, in knowing that I am a writer and I need to pursue my calling in that, is figuring out how to sustain life doing that. So, part of that we're praying about, and I talk about Katrina and I in our marriage, is potentially learning how to teach these skills, to teach people about our marriage, to teach people about our family life and our experiences, and put all the parts and pieces together to figure out how to monetize that in a real way that allows us to sustain life and really help others. That's our desire, is to be able to tell stories, help others in a real way that allows us to sustain life uh, in a real way. So that's our challenge ahead.
Well, that sounds amazing. It sounds like the journey's going to continue, and we will look forward to hearing more about that and watching as that journey goes forward. Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to be with us today, and great conversation. We love to hear your stories and look forward to hearing more in the future.
And where can those people who are wanting your book, and where can they find it?
So the book is available, Almost Home, Setting Our Sights Toward Heaven. The book's available on all major retailers online right now, and they can go to my website at almosthomebooks.com and order books from there as well.
All right, so those of you who are looking for a book that combines faith and family and stories and, kind of all of these things, this is a wonderful book to read. Highly recommend it. So yes, go find that copy and help David as he's launching his book and starting this whole new lifestyle.
All right. We can't wait to hear more of your stories, David. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure getting to know you for the last hour.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.